Yo, what up, vendors? Welcome to the Vendor Booth. On this podcast, we dive into the world of being a vendor with a little BTS, a little DIY, tons of tips and tricks, and every now and then we chop it up with vendors from around the country. On this episode, well, this is the pilot, so allow me to introduce myself. My name is Diz. I run a creative studio called Dizmajiz. My peoples that know me, what up peeps, know that I do graphics. And some of y'all may have heard of me through the likes of Big Brando. I gotta give a shout out to my brother Big Brando. My dude, I appreciate all the support that you giving me, all the love that you show me on your YouTube channel. So Big Brando has always shouted out that I'm a vendor. I've been a vendor for 20 plus years, and in getting ready for this podcast, I decided to trace my roots and give you a full view of where I come from and how it all began for me with vending. Now, I grew up in the Bronx, New York, aka the BX, the home of hip hop. And I literally grew up where hip hop began. Where I live at, which is 174th and University. There's 7 buildings, the projects, there's 7 buildings, 3 parks, and a basketball court. Our projects sit right on top of 1520 Sedgwick, where Kool Herc created hip hop. Literally right up the steps. So, as I said, I come from Sedgwick Projects, and we have an annual event which is called Sedgwick Day. And going way back to when I was like 8, 9 years old, there was a guy that was in charge of the basketball tournament named York. And I don't know if he knew I was drawing at that time or whatever the case may be, but he asked would I help make the t-shirts. And this was also when I got into, or how I got into making t-shirts to begin with. It wasn't like it is now, where you got all these different print methods, DTF, and you got screen printing, and you got all this. We didn't have access to none of that. It was bags and bags of Fruit of the Loom white t-shirts, a pencil, and different color paints. And we hand drew every single jersey for 4 to 6 teams, 10 people on each team. I would do 3 teams, he would do 3 teams. We finish up the jerseys and get ready for Sedgwick Day, which is the following day. A little side note, I had no clue that back then when I first made these t-shirts, that it would end up being on a well-known star. The building that I lived in, my man Scott, aka Scott LaRock, rest in peace, Scott, lived on the 7th floor. And I actually got hand-me-downs from Scott. And he was actually one of the players in the tournament. Little known fact. So we move on. Sedgwick Day comes. Now, we up early, we got to set up this booth, which is an 8-foot table. And on that table, we got the jerseys, we got the roster book, we got the first aid kit, and we got some snacks, some water, whatever, right? And my job, aside from helping set everything up, my job was to work with each player or hand each player their jersey. This was my intro into vending because it's the same format, right? We got our booth, the table, we got our merch, and we serve our customers. Now, this went on for as long as I could remember. As I grew up, I've always been a participant in Sedgwick Day in some way, shape, or form. So here I am years later. I'm getting better at being an artist. I got clients now. I got a small budding business, freelance. And one of my clients says, "Can you help me out with my show?" So I said, "All right, cool." The show was a pop up at Bronx Community College. And we show up there. It's in the gym. There's a lady standing in front with a clipboard. You look inside the gym. There's about 36-foot tables set up in a grid, like with lanes and everything, walking lanes. And there's people all over, which were vendors. And this was my first look at a vendor space in terms of there being more than one vendor or more than one vendor booth, right? So I'm a teenager at this time, and the lady tells my guy what his table number is. We go to the table, drop the boxes of merch on the table, and that's it. We finish with setup. I leave. I come back when the show is over to help shut everything down. We pack up. I'm thinking my thing with being a vendor is over, or my experience with vending is over. And a couple of weeks later, a client hits me up. "Yo, I got a show." And another client hits me up. "I got a show. Can you help me out?" And another one and another one. And this was in various shapes and forms. This was making flyers, making posters, making t-shirts, helping out with booth design. So I did that for a little while. And I didn't really think nothing of it. It was still a loose connection. It wasn't like, I gotta be doing this, right? So then many moons later, a client hits me up and says, "Yo, you ever been to New York Comic Con?" And I'm like, "What?" This is like early 2000s. New York Comic Con had been in existence at that point, maybe like 5-6 years. So I'm thinking like maybe 2011, 2012 in that area. Anyway, so he's like, "Yeah, you should come through." So he tells me Saturday is the best day to go. So I go Saturday. We get down there. I had never been to Jacob Javits Center. And we go to the front. We pull up in front. And I'm immediately overwhelmed because it was like half of freaking New York City was there. We talking about 75,000 people, maybe 100,000 people. I don't even know the count at that point. I didn't know the count, but it was people every freaking where. And we got on our vendor passes. We walk in through the doors. And now I had been loosely associated with being a vendor. So the most I had seen was 30 or 40 tables in a room, right? We walk into Jacob Javits Center and it's mind-blowing because there's like Marvel with this huge booth. There's DC, equally huge. Then there's all these other different brands and every shape and form, every freaking kind of style of booth. And I'm a visual person, being creative, I'm visual. So all this eye candy in front of me, I'm like about to break down because it's overload. And I'm there and I'm like, "Yo, what the hell?" So I'm walking around this huge event space, over 200 booths, and just like trying to soak it all in. And then the doors open and all these people rush in. And you can't, like, you could barely freaking breathe in the place. And I walk out of there and I'm like, what the hell did I just experience? But the rush was so much that it was like that hit, and I needed more. So hit the client up and said, "Yo, what other events you got going on?" And I start hanging out and just being an assistant in the booth. for the next year, 2 years, and figuring out the whole game, right? And what I would do is we would walk into a space. I tried to find who was running the show, introduce myself, that kind of thing, and go help set up, do whatever I had to do. And all these, over these 2 years, 2, 3 years or whatever it was, I'm just navigating the entire vending world, right? And seeing where I fit in. Here I am. I'm going to New York Comic Con and all these other shows for approximately 2 years as an assistant, as a helper. And I finally decide, you know what? I'm going to bring my merch. You know, I've been working on it over the years and really getting good at what I do. And finally, I came up with a concept that I wanted to present to the world. I decide, I'm going to bring them to New York Comic Con. Now, at this point, New York Comic Con has grown substantially. And I'm like, in my mind, the potential of me selling out was so grand. Like, oh, I know I'm going to sell my shirts. I was hyped. I'm going to sell my stuff. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I got my item. Doors open. I don't sell shit. I don't sell nothing. I go home with what I came with. And what made it worse was, at this point, New York Comic Con had grown so big. It went from my first outing, which I believe was like 70, 75,000 people, 80,000 people. It went from that number to approximately 125,000 people. And I'm like, I couldn't sell my handful of t-shirts to 125,000 people. I fucking sucked.